The number one question that I get every 4 years is, Brian, how do elections impact investments, markets, retirements? What I do know for sure, as you can imagine as well, that elections stir up a lot of emotion. Regardless of which side you're on, there's a lot of emotion around elections, especially these last 4, 8, 12 years. It's been a different cycle than it has been 30 or 40 years ago. The country, as we can all probably recognize, is pretty divided on either side. But I really want to try to strip that emotion out of it and look at this from a 25,000-foot view so we can make sound, clear, logical conclusions from data going back over 100 years as to how this cycle actually does impact markets, retirements, and investments. So what I wanted to do is share with you a couple of different data points to help you understand more about how we think about this. The first data point I wanted to show you is the growth of $1 invested in the S&P 500 going from January of 1926 all the way through December of 2019. This was the best graphic that I could find to show this trend. The trend continues from 2019 until today. The market did well under President Trump and they continue to do well under President Biden. But you can see the general trend of markets all the way back 100 years is that markets have grinded higher over time with relative consistency. Now, red obviously for Republican presidents and blue for Democrat presidents. It really hasn't made a difference. And this color chart with the graph, I really think does a great job of highlighting exactly that fact. This is another graphic that shows the same thing. Red lines for Republicans, blue lines for Democrats, the black being the average. Essentially, it shows that markets are volatile leading up to the election, and after the election, stocks really don't care that much who wins. And this has been consistent over time. So, especially people that are very political and have very strong feelings on one side or the other, it's very easy for them to think, if this person wins, then I need to make these big changes in my investments because the country is, going up in smoke, right? But that has been consistently wrong. Betting against America has been a very, very bad bet for over 200 years. And I don't think that we want to start now, even though it always feels like this time is different. It always feels that way. And it's so, so important to try to move past that. There is some impact if you have a really focused investment strategy in a certain sector. So if you had all of clean energy, solar type investments, it probably matters who wins, Democrat or Republican. If you owned all stocks that owned coal mines, it probably matters who wins. So depending on who wins, it does impact certain sectors, but that's why it's so key that everyone needs to be diversified around these sectors. What I do find interesting about this prognostication is how, regardless of who wins, there does seem to be joint agreement that big technology has gotten a little bit too big, and there's chatter around how to kind of rein that in. There's lawsuits going on around NVIDIA and Google about potentially, or in Google's case, potentially a breakup similar to what was proposed for Microsoft in the late 90s. And those investments are very, very expensive. We have to own them, but we just maybe want to own a little bit less of those. What I think is really, really important, what I want to talk about is, what are the known knowns, right? What we do know for sure, it feels like, unless something really, really drastic changes, is that regardless of the winner of the elections in 2 months-ish time, we know that the debt is going to continue to go higher, right? Because the U.S. has been spending quite a bit of money, has been historically, and really ramped that up post-COVID. We added roughly $4 trillion of debt under President Trump post-COVID, another $4 trillion roughly post-election during President Biden's term. So neither Democrats or Republicans really seem to care right now about increasing spending. We can see that those deficit projections seem to go higher. These deficits of roughly like 7 or 8% were traditionally seen during recession, war, but now the economy continues to be growing even though inflation's higher and we have a high deficit. This slide to me is super, super interesting. We look at this pie chart here. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and a few other mandatory programs, those make up 62% of all the dollars that the US government spends. The interest on the national debt, that's another 10% and rising as interest rates on that debt rolls over from very low rates, during COVID and pre-COVID to now higher rates. And then in the green is everything else. Discretionary and defense is 28%. But of this green slice of the pie, half of it is defense spending. So between Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense, and the interest on the national debt, that's roughly 85% of everything that the U.S. Spends in a given year. So what are the implications of this? I think it's possible and should be considered that interest rates and inflation might be higher for longer. The world of 0 to 2% rates like we experienced from 08-09 into COVID, where they went even lower, and then in 2022 when they started going up. We don't know if that will come back. It seems unlikely that it will. We want to prepare for a world of higher interest rates. We have an aging population, right? And that's going to require more spending for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. So thinking about the ramifications of that, I think we'll have a much more impactful resolution towards investments than thinking about what is the near-term impact of the election. We know it increases volatility, but does not impact stock returns really in any tangible way in the short or long term, regardless of which party is in power, as the data suggests. So step back, strip the emotion out of it, look at it from 25, 30,000 feet up, and how do we make rational choices about investments, portfolios, markets, and retirements moving forward. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you found it insightful. And thank you for watching. And if you have a second, don't feel shy about subscribing to our channel to get more content that we put out around this topic and a lot of others. Thanks so much.